What's going on, everybody? Welcome in to For the Millie, myself, TwoGun. We've got Thursday Night Football. We will be here talking to you guys every single Monday and Thursday at this time, 5:30. TwoGun, I know you put in more money than you ever have before in best ball. You're going to do the same with Pick-6. I mean, you got to be so ready to go here.
Yeah, I'm wondering why. I always tell myself, start the season off slowly. You do better at the end of the season, and then I'm like, let's max it. Oh my god, look at all these contests. Let's go. And then I'm like, wait, it's just one game, and I'm like, whatever, let's go.
I mean, you don't play baseball DFS, NBA DFS, or PGA DFS like a lot of us, like myself. So you haven't had the DFS sweats in so long. I don't think anyone could possibly blame you for just wanting to get going as much as possible.
Yeah, the funny thing is, I've actually been doing a little bit of Pick-6 on MLB. I don't do the regular DFS on MLB. I've just been doing the Pick-6 since it's a little bit easier, and I've been trying to learn, how to play Pick-6. So I feel like a little bit more comfortable with it, and understanding the difference between when you do a Pick-6 for one game or when you're doing a Pick-6 for a bunch of games like Sunday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. We're going to talk a ton about Pick-6, and honestly, my personal thought is that these island games are where Pick-6 is going to be the most fun and the most profitable. So very excited to talk that through. But first, we're going to dive into the showdown tonight between Baltimore and Kansas City. If I recall correctly, you've always been this main slate connoisseur in NFL DFS, and last year you had a ton of showdown success. In fact, we both had that fantastic showdown between Seattle and Dallas. So hopefully we can bring some of that magic right back to start the year.
Yeah, it was a weird year. Like, I did real well at a showdown, and I basically lost every Sunday on DraftKings in the main slate until the very end, and I won $1 million. And I was like, I was playing for it. Just lose. Oh, I knew that million was coming, so it's all good. But I did do pretty well on the showdowns. In general, I do about 10 times as much money on the main slate as the showdown, so I would have preferred to do it better on the main slate, but hey, I'll take winning when I can, right? Mm-hmm. And it kind of gave me a new respect for showdowns because it's far more in choosing a game, like a game script,
mm-hmm.
not so much choosing a player, because after all, everyone's going to be using the same players more or less. You're not going to be choosing a 5% used player unless that guy's just an idiot. That's probably a dumb play. So it's really more about how you go about constructing your lineup and in a way that you think the game might be a little bit different than other people see the game.
Yeah, 100%. It's the classic case of trying to outbuild your opponents instead of trying to outpick them. It's really hard to figure out exactly who's going to get those touchdowns, who's going to get those big plays. It's a lot easier to say, I know with certainty that the vast majority of the field expects this to happen in the game, but this other, game flow is just as likely, or maybe it's only a little bit less likely. And if that happens, all these lower owned guys benefit. So it's nice because you and I have the pretty much exact same approach to showdown slates. So I think more often than not, we're going to end up on a lot of the same builds. But one of the things that we've kind of promised each other going into this season, doing all these shows together, is we're not going to be afraid to disagree. And when we disagree, we're going to hash out those debates. And anybody listening in can tell us, Alex is right, TwoGun's wrong, or TwoGun's right, Alex is wrong. We want to hear that. And while I say that, I should bring up, follow along with us in the live chat over on YouTube. Ask us questions throughout the show. Whatever you want to do, you can let us know your favorite captain's plays for tonight, your favorite Pick-6 picks, anything you want to discuss. We will be discussing with you guys throughout the live show. So tune in there over on YouTube chat if you're watching right now on Twitter.
I'm just going to say, Alex, the good thing for me is I can be like, Alex, when you win 6 million makers, you can talk back. Until then, I can just be like, rings or scoreboard. Yeah. And that's kind of that. Even if you end up
in red,
like, guess what? 5 million makers. So
I was going to say, you said 6 before, so it sounded like maybe you were predicting one for yourself.
You have to win at least 6 to get ahead of me.
Okay. I'm just going to try to get 1 to start. I've got a ticket in week 1 where I might be able to do exactly that. But I'm a little bummed. I thought you were calling your shot here for Millie Maker number 6 tonight. You're not confident or something?
Tonight in the showdown, probably not. Honestly, with the showdowns, I prefer the like
Mhm.
smaller amount of entries, like 500 or less entries in general, because it's I want to think of something unique, but I don't want to think of something like idiotic.
Right.
And to ship a Millie Maker in a showdown solo, we are generally thinking of something way, way off the deep rail. So I'm not really focused on that. I'm focused more on winning a good amount. I'm not focused on, solo shipping the $15 Millie Maker.
I
So
I
and
think
I
number
think
one, I
it's kind of somewhat the same way in the main slate, but in the main slate, you can get those 3% guys that you
Mhm.
can beat, tens of thousands of people with. So I think these showdowns are great for winning, a medium to large amount, but don't expect to like the $1 million hit on a showdown.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I also think that an underrated aspect of playing those smaller contests on the showdowns is there's nothing less fun on a showdown than first drive of the game, somebody that you don't have scores a touchdown, and you say, well, there goes my showdown. I don't have a chance of a takedown. In smaller contests, you do, because you never know what's actually going to be required to get that top score in a smaller contest. Whereas you might know, like, if a $2,500 guy scores a touchdown on the opening drive, chances are he's going to be optimal, and therefore you're going to need him to win those, a big lottery style contest. You might not in a $200 single entry with 277 people or something like that. So smaller contests, I'm completely with you there. And the nice thing is, in NFL, DraftKings does have more contest options, and so even if you are at lower stakes, you can find some of those really nice smaller contests as well. Looks like TwoGun's doing some daycare responsibilities right
Yeah.
now, so we'll give him a minute to come back.
Yeah, sometimes you can have two babysitters, and yet somehow they still sneak in there. There's little things like that. And
They just want the advice too.
yeah,
They
he
want to
is
know
too
who you're
good.
playing the
He's
showdown.
an old sniper. He manages to, he manages to get in here without I can't doubt him.
He wants to know your showdown thoughts, as we all do. So with that, let's start talking about our actual approach to the slate. I think the natural place to start is always with ownership. So if we go to the optimizer over on ftnfantasy.com, we can see the top four guys in captain ownership are all Chiefs. Rashi Rice first, right under 21%. Isaiah Pacheco, 17%. Mahomes, just under 14. And Travis Kelce, because he is more expensive than Rice, Pacheco, and Xavier Worthy, he comes in at fourth at 10.5%. Then on the Baltimore side, you get Mark Andrews leading the way at 10.4%. Derrick Henry, 8.7%. Lamar Jackson all the way down at 6%. He strikes me as the guy who, if we're surprised at captain ownership for one guy, it's that I think Lamar could end up being more like 15%, even 20%, simply because what we have seen over the years is that when there is a quarterback with high rushing upside on these showdown slates, on these island games, people like to use them and access that rushing upside.
Yeah, I mean, I think Lamar Jackson is going to be the most used player, period, in this slate. So I expect him to use a lot as captain. It's an interesting game because I think people generally are betting on the Ravens. I don't know if they're going to, translates to more for DFS. I think people generally going to want to be, 50-50 on DFS. And really, there's about a similar amount of fantasy relevant guys on each side. And you have these like really cheap Chiefs here and there that are generally bad, but will make it easy to fit in all the other studs. So those guys will end up getting some ownership, like the Justin Watsons and the random dudes or Noah Grays. I mean, not that they're going to get much, but he just takes one and you can fit in all the other guys. And then I think Xavier Worthy, he's kind of cheap, and I don't like him, but he's going to be popular, and it makes it easier to have a nice looking lineup if you have him in your lineup.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because in Showdown, a lot of the time ownership does reflect just what people expect to happen in the actual game itself. Whoever, people expect to win the game is who people end up on from an ownership perspective. But there are times where things change. And I think this slate has two key aspects. that will swing ownership in Kansas City's favor. The first is just pricing itself. Lamar Jackson is $1,000 more expensive than Mahomes as a flex. Travis Kelce is kind of the only Chief who's more expensive than his Baltimore counterpart, and that's why he might slip through the cracks, whereas Mark Andrews is going to be one of the more popular, or maybe even the most popular Raven. But then you get Derrick Henry is more expensive than Pacheco. You get Zay Flowers more expensive than Rashee Rice, even though Rice was kind of the better producer, at least towards the latter half of last season. You get Xavier Worthy all the way down at $5,800, benefiting from no Marquise Brown. I believe when pricing came out, Brown wasn't expected to miss the game, and so there's like this automatic, maybe underpriced guy, at least in terms of people's perception of him. So pricing itself, I think, is really going to drive people towards Kansas City. And then the other aspect is just think of pass volume, right? We know that Baltimore tends to be a little bit more run heavy than Kansas City, and one team has Patrick Mahomes throwing the ball, the other has Lamar Jackson throwing the ball. Now, Lamar might be better than many people like to give him credit for throwing the ball, but we can certainly expect Mahomes to throw it more often and more effectively. And so it's just natural for people to want to go to Mahomes' skill guys instead of Lamar's.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I think people are going to try to choose the balanced lineup. We talk a lot about percentages, but you have to think about like combo percentages. Like, how many people are going to have 5-1 Chiefs? How many people are going to have 3-3? Like, how many people are going to spend all their salary on one team versus the other team? And I think what we're going to see is a lot of people trying to cut their salary almost in half. They'll try to have Lamar and, a pass catcher, and then they'll try to have, 3 or 4 Chiefs or something like that. And that's generally the lineup I'm trying to fade. I'm trying to either do a ton of Chiefs. That's what I'm generally doing. I do have a lean on Kansas City on this game in general. And you're kind of talking me into going to Baltimore, but I don't want to swing too much. But I generally do have some Baltimore stacks that are very, Baltimore heavy, but I try to call at least 70% of my salary for one team. And that's, I think, how I'm trying to be unique. Not so much trying to be like, okay, I think, Zay Flowers will be a little bit less used than Rashee Rice.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of where I'm really trying to go for it more.
I agree completely with this comment from Taylor. 3 Kansas City, 3 Baltimore, 4 Kansas City, 2 Baltimore, probably around 70% of lineups. I without question think that these will be the 2 most common builds. I think if you want leverage, I think the places to go are 1 removed from that. So you either go 2 Kansas City, 4 Baltimore, or you go to the Kansas City onslaught, as TwoGun said. The main reason why I don't want to go to the Baltimore onslaught is kind of what I was just discussing, because if Baltimore is rolling, it means Mahomes is throwing the ball a lot, and the chances that he doesn't help at least 2 skill guys just get there on yards and receptions alone just seems super, super low. So I'm probably going for Baltimore 2 Kansas City. It sounds like TwoGun, I know you have a bunch of different lineups, but it sounds like 5-1 Kansas City might be your preferred.
Yeah, in general, I'm going to look through my stuff a little bit more again. I have like 20 lineups or 21 lineups, so I could probably tweak it a little bit. And I'm going to have some that are like 3-3, 4-2, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm really looking more towards trying to keep it more of an onslaught one way or the other. And another thing I'm looking for is having Derrick Henry. I just like the running backs in this game in general, and I like the kickers in this game. Maybe the quarterbacks don't throw a bunch of touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's another way to go about it. And one thing I like doing in showdowns is if I have the kicker, don't have the quarterback, unless it's a 5-1 situation. Like if I don't have Mahomes, I have Butker. Because Mahomes just isn't going to – if he only throws 1 touchdown and he throws like 250 yards, he's skippable. And you have Butker get like 10 points or something like that. That's the type of pivot I'm looking at in some of my lineups as well when I don't have a bunch of Mahomes in it, stuff like that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all of that. I think let's do this. Let's talk through what a 5-1 Kansas City stack should look like. Then let's talk through what a 2-4 kind of going to the Baltimore side lineup should look like. And then we can kind of talk, maybe we have some favorite plays or some favorite correlation pieces. Like you alluded there to the idea that maybe you go to a kicker when you don't have a quarterback. One of my favorites that I will talk about throughout this show is I really like the idea of what happens if Derrick Henry scores all of Baltimore's touchdowns. So using Henry either as a captain or a flex without Lamar. Same kind of concept. So we'll talk through all of that. But let's start with the Kansas City Onslaught favorite captains, favorite Baltimore runbacks. What are you thinking here?
So generally my favorite captain for Kansas City is going to be a Pacheco or Kelsey, because I just feel like, it could just be one of those, everyone thinks Travis Kelsey's out or he's washed and they're trying to fade him because of the salary, and he just ends up doing those 2 touchdown games. So he makes a great captain there. Or I honestly think Pacheco might be their best skill player. I just really like Pacheco and this year in general, so I like him as a captain. Generally, quarterback at captain isn't great unless you are in a smaller contest, like in terms of users. So that's why I generally look for those guys. And then if it's a 5-1 also, I'm going to have Mahomes in it, just probably not as captain. I'm going to have maybe the Kansas City defense, and I might have Butker, and then I'll come back with Lamar if I have the salary, or I'll come back with Henry. That's generally who I'm doing in a 5-1.
I think I love the Kelsey call the most. And the reason for that is I think one of the key points on Showdown is that when you're picking a captain, think of what you're asking that guy to do. You're asking him to have that, multi-touchdown game. You're asking him to get 100-yard bonus, things of that nature. If the guy does that, if he gets you what you're looking for from him, his price doesn't really matter a ton. And so when you have captain ownerships, like very specifically reflecting pricing decisions that DraftKings made, I think it's an opportunity to leverage against that. So Travis Kelsey, significantly more expensive than Pacheco. Rashee Rice, less expensive even than Pacheco himself. So we very clearly have, Rice as the most popular captain because of that discount. We have Pacheco more popular than Kelsey because of that discount. And then we also have, Xavier Worthy's cheap enough that people don't really want to go to Mahomes, because if you're going to go to Mahomes, then you're asking him to have those big plays. And hey, if he has big plays, chances are, Worthy's getting there. So I don't see Mahomes getting to 20-25% in single entries, things of that nature. So I really like this Kelsey call. I think he stays 10 to 15% max in single entries at captain. There's even a chance that it goes so heavily to Pacheco and Rice at the top of Kansas City's guys that maybe you even get Kelsey at like 8% captain. So I love that call. I think I'm in complete agreement there. And I would also say I think I agree with Pacheco over Rice as well. Again, just because that price discount I think is going to make Rice the clear number 1.
Yeah, and just kind of going another way to think about things is when you go with an expensive guy as captain, you're often going for a lower scoring game than if you go for like a cheaper guy. Yep. Because a lot of times people will find a cheap guy they like, and then they fit all the studs. And what they're really trying to say is the cheap guy scores, and so does everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
When you're going with an expensive guy, you're saying that's the guy that scores, and then I'm throwing in the defense and the kicker. Like the rest of the game really might not be that much scoring, so let me get this other guys.
That's a great point. When we've talked so far about the split between people building for Kansas City versus people building for Baltimore, we haven't really talked yet about building for a high scoring game or a low scoring game. So you've already mentioned you kind of like kickers and defense tonight. So obviously it sounds like you're going low scoring, and I think you and I both tend to do that because people build lineups for what they hope to see a lot of the time. What they hope to see is offense, unless you're kind of a psychopath.
Right, I am a psychopath, so I do like to build for low scoring.
Yeah.
Kind of like in the Super Bowl, I built for stuff for like a low scoring San Francisco to win the game, and for Mahomes to not act like a demigod. And sure enough, I lost everything on the Super Bowl. I got annihilated in the season. I won like $1 million the week before, so I was really high on myself, and then boom, smack, back to reality. But whatever, I'm gonna do it again. In general, I'm kind of acting like Lamar Jackson's not going to, like our boy Aaron Schatz was the only guy that didn't vote for Lamar Jackson for MVP. Maybe he'll get some sort of weird, like, hey, actually, he looks like he sucks this year. And obviously Lamar Jackson doesn't suck. But I'm really building. Like I have a lot of kicker use. I have some defense use. I have double kicker. It's really kind of sad. It makes for a sad competitive game. That's maybe what we get. We get a sad competitive game. We get like a 20-17 type situation where Pacheco and Derrick Henry were the ones that score the touchdowns, and Mahomes gets like one passing touchdown or something like that. That's I should do well in.
Mhm.
It's not so much that I need Kansas City to blow them out 35-3 or Baltimore to blow them out 28-14. I just need a kind of a sad game with kickers and not having Mecole Hardman and Justin Watson get 50 yards and a touchdown, or Xavier Ward to get 80 yards and a touchdown. That's how I lose.
Yeah.
Long balls to Justin Watson, Xavier Worthy, guys like that. That's how I'm going to lose. I'm not going to lose if it's a controlled, boring game.
Yeah. And not only that, but these are also two teams who have been really good in terms of, kind of just dampening production on the other side. Last year, we now have this brand new metric, DVOA adjusted fantasy points against. It accounts for the opponent that teams face, and it just adds some predictive value from DVOA. Baltimore allowed 26% less production than usual to opposing quarterbacks, 20% less than usual to running backs, just negative across the board for all receiver types and tight ends. Kansas City, not so different. 10% down for quarterbacks, 9% down for running backs, 21% down overall for receivers, 13% for tight ends. They were 30% down for both wide receiver ones and wide receiver threes, which are typically like slot guys, etc. The only positive was a plus 4% for wide receiver twos allowed by Kansas City. But basically, as you're saying, production down across the board because of these defenses, because of the way Baltimore just controls the ball offensively. So I'm with you. I think low scoring is
spoke a lot of nerd. The over-under is 46.5. People probably think the over-under is 55.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And that's something people have to remember. It's 46.5. It's a very average football game, is what Vegas is expecting.
And not only that, but it's a lot lower than these two teams are used to seeing, right?
Yeah.
Especially the individual team totals. These teams are used to having team totals around 27, 28 points, not way down at 25 or below. So
the other thing about Baltimore, they can make a game really boring because they like to run the ball. And when you run the ball, the clock just keeps going. And before you know it, the game's over. And people are like, but I thought they were going to throw the ball. And Baltimore's like, well, we were ahead and we just kept running the ball. We signed Derrick Henry. You think we signed Derrick Henry so we can throw the ball more? No, yeah. They signed the ball to Derrick Henry to make the game even more boring. They make it more exciting. Derrick Henry isn't going to be doing Reggie Bush flips into the touchdown. No, they want Derrick Henry to make the game nice and boring, and they want to squeak by with their defense and Derrick Henry and win the game like 21-17 or something like that. And I should do okay in that situation, but maybe that 17 is a Xavier Worthy 80-yard touchdown pass, and I lose anyways, and I'm like, God damn.
Well, all of that was a fantastic explanation for why Derrick Henry is my favorite captain tonight. Before we get into why and before we start talking about 4-2 Baltimore builds, is Henry your favorite Raven as the one guy in a Kansas City onslaught, or are you then kind of going to a pass catcher and just mixing in a bunch of different Ravens?
I don't focus too much on my favorite guy in a Kansas City onslaught because it's often just who I have that I can fit in. I think of it more as like, which guys do I have the most money on? And especially compared to other people. And I would say I have a lot of money on Derrick Henry and I have a lot of money on Pacheco. So either way, I like those guys. I just don't have that much money on these receivers. I have like a quarter of the money on Zay Flowers as I do on Derrick Henry right now. That's all you kind of need to know. I like Derrick Henry. I like Pacheco. I do not like receivers catching the ball. I'm okay with the tight ends catching the ball. But I don't want big wide receiver plays. That's how I'm going to lose. And generally in my 4-2 or 5-1 stacks, I'm going to have a receiver here or there. But in general, I want the running backs and the kickers to be controlling this game.
Hey, all you knuckleheads in the FTN chat, kind of trying to talk to us in Discord there. it's really, really difficult for me to go into Discord too. Get yourself in the YouTube chat. Make things easy for me, please. But yeah, I agree there. One final question on Ravens. Do you have any Justice Hill as a bring back to Kansas City Onslaughts?
I have 20 lineups. Right now, he is in 1.
Beautiful.
I
think
that's
probably right. I think that's the correct amount.
I don't like backup running backs.
Yeah.
Especially on a team where the quarterback runs the ball, and they just paid this guy to run the ball. Like, maybe you could talk to me about P. Ryan, blah, blah, blah. Not a backup running back kind of guy.
I agree. I think part of that, too, is sometimes you build a lineup for a specific game flow. You don't get that game flow, and yet somehow your lineup does quite well anyway, right? Like you get the touchdowns correct. You get lucky in that regard. If you're going to a backup running back whose only path to getting there is that you nail the game script perfectly, you just kind of narrow your paths to success. So I'm in agreement, and also just the ceiling there is so low. With that, let's go to the Baltimore 4-2 stacks. You already know my favorite captain, Derrick Henry. Is he your favorite Raven captain in those types of lineups as well?
Sometimes. I like Derrick Henry, or I like Mark Andrews. Generally in those. I also even have Lamar Jackson. I'm kind of indifferent. I have to look at about over. Generally with Derrick Henry is, as captain, I'll sometimes have that in a weirder lineup. Not just a onslaught, like a Derrick Henry with Butker and one other guy, like Lamar Jackson, just like Derrick Henry gets 2 touchdowns, Lamar Jackson gets 0 type situation. Like, he ends up being the highest fantasy score, but it's a close game, or Baltimore even loses. That's the type of sometimes when I'm having Henry be the captain. Not so much like Lamar's throwing the ball for 250 yards and getting 3 touchdowns, and like they're just putting up points. That's not really where I'm putting Derrick Henry as captain.
Yep, I agree with that as well. We got more people, and I'm now being trolled in the chat for telling people to go to the YouTube chat. I probably deserve it, but yeah. I'll tell you, I think another reason why I really like the Baltimore 4-2 stack is because I like an individual play on Baltimore a lot more than I typically like individual plays just for the sake of the individual play on the showdowns, and that is Nelson Agholor. Only $3,400, cheaper than both kickers, cheaper than both defenses. This is a guy who was effective last year as the 4th wide receiver on the team. Now he should start at slot receiver. Maybe he doesn't see this like big boom in snaps because they'll still be on some kind of rotation, and they might use a little bit more to tight end now that Isaiah Likely has really kind of emerged as such a great option for them. But man, he's going to be on the field, and the guy makes big plays. There are cheaper guys like Samaje Perine and Isaiah Likely who I think are going to be more popular. So he just kind of fits as this really contrarian guy who I actually think is a really good play for his price, and he helps leverage some of these other lineups that have some other value guys around him. So I really like the Agholor play. And so as much as I like the Henry usage as a pivot off of Lamar, I think more likely I will have Henry captain with Lamar, with Agholor, and then probably one more Raven and 2 Chiefs.
Again, I think Agholor he just tends to do better on high scoring lineups because he is so cheap. And he may or may not score a touchdown. He does. I think you might be talking me more into his Pick-6, picking him more in Pick-6 than I am in so much in DFS.
That's fair. The way that I would counter it is because I think it's low scoring, I don't feel like I need Agholor to do a ton. If he has 2 catches, 20 yards, and a touchdown, that's probably enough. If he has 4 catches for 60 yards and no touchdowns, that might be enough. So I see what you mean, but I also think that there's an argument either direction based on what I'm asking of him.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense.
And I'll say particularly because I think that I'm going to want Kelsey as my chief because I do think he's got a chance to slip through the cracks. So I feel like I'm going to need savings out anyway. So he's also just helping me kind of pull off the build that I want. So Yeah, I mean, honestly, like that's kind of the fun of Showdown, though, is because again, I talked about having like multiple paths to getting there. My lineup might do just as well in a 30 to 27 game as it would in a 17-14 game. I don't know that for sure, but it could depending on how the game goes. So I like
Yeah,
having those
honestly,
multiple paths.
you're just thinking like one lineup. You're into like a one lineup kind of guy. I'm more of like a I generally do only like a few lineups in Showdown, but it's the first game, so of course I got to have like at least 20 or 25. So,
Here's a
I
question.
just think a little bit differently than you. I'm like, I guess I should have a little more. And now it's like, oh shit, I don't even know I have likely. I'm like, I guess I gotta have them in this one lineup. Normally I'd be like, skip or whatever, who cares?
Yeah.
But now like, I gotta put him at least one because I don't know, he scores a touchdown, I won't be crying all night.
That brings up a good question though. When you're running 20 lineups like this, what kind of contests are they in? Are we talking 1,000-person contest, 10,000, 500? What's the size now?
Okay, so again, it's because it's the first night. I'm entering all my lineups, obviously into the kickoff millionaire, but into this $333 Wildcat with 2,500 lineups.
Okay.
So, and then the lineups I like more, I enter them into the higher stakes contest with the $2,000 entry and then some of them I enter into those satellite ones with anywhere from 100 to 500 entries. So it just depends on how much I like the lineup.
I think it's a perfect teaching point though, because when I said Aguilar and you said you feel like that needs to be higher scoring, when you're trying to beat 2,500 people and you have Aguilar, you probably do need more like 4 catches, 60 yards, and a touchdown, not one or the other, right? And so in my 277 person $200 single entry, which is my favorite contest, basically every single slate, what I am asking from him is probably less. So I think what your response was perfectly suitable for the contest type that you're in. And I think that's just a perfect teaching point for everybody out there, is just kind of know the contest you're in and how that affects what you're asking of your guys.
Yeah, and the other thing is like, people talk about leaving salary on the table and stuff like that. Whenever you start getting into like, if you focus your lineups on these contests with 100,000 plus entries, it just kind of like you start playing a whole different level of game than when you're playing a more normal contest. And I just don't like doing that. I like to play a normal contest. To me, a normal contest is 3,000 people or less. That's to me a normal contest.
Yeah, I pretty much call everything else lottery tickets. So I'm with you there.
And even for Showdown, I prefer 300 people or less, to be honest.
Yeah.
For my more favorite lineups.
Do you have any other thoughts on the Showdown before we move on to some Pick-6 thoughts?
Not really.
Cool. All right. For those of you who haven't played Pick-6, or for those of you who maybe you've given it a try and it wasn't totally your cup of tea, I think you want to listen to the show, because I think after we kind of talk through the strategy behind the game, why there's such an advantage to this peer-to-peer style relative to the prize picks and underdog alternatives, you might find it a lot more interesting than you do right now. So first of all, one reason to do it is because there's free money. If you play $5, you get a free $50. And there are some other promos going on. In fact, you can now see on the screen here, we've got Pick-6 set up. And TwoGun, I want to turn it to you first. And why don't we just talk some general strategy? What are your thoughts about Pick-6? I know you've been playing for a decent amount of time now. What are your just kind of like immediate takeaways, and what are you trying to do as you build these lineups in these contests?
So the important thing to remember about Pick-6 versus those other sites like Underdog, Prize Picks, etc., is that Pick-6 you're playing against other people. You're not playing against the house, and that's important for two reasons. First, you can actually win at Pick-6, and they don't ban you or limit you. Like on some of these other sites, you show a half a brain, you get limited to $10. They're not going to do you on DraftKings because you're playing against other people.
Real quick, I was 100% certain that you were going to mention that first as your favorite part of peer-to-peer not getting limited. I know how quickly you were limited on other sites, so no surprise you got right.
Here's the thing. Whenever you hear these guys talk about like how much they bet, and if they're betting against the house, why does the house let them bet that much?
Right.
Sometimes some guys are allowed because they are so famous that they're like, you're cool, you're famous, you do all this promo stuff for us. There's a few guys like that. I don't want to like throw everyone under the bus. In general, because I know some professional sports bettors, half of winning when you're playing against the house, half of it is just basically getting away with it. And you have to do all sorts of stuff that I don't want to deal with. Let's not go there, but it's so much easier playing a peer-to-peer contest where the house isn't against you because they're not going to want to let you win, especially with the way these companies are run. So that's the first part. The second part is you have to remember you're not just playing, the odds are different depending on how you set your lineups. And you have to think of your Pick-6 picks as a lineup. Don't just view them as picks. Like, I got 5 rights, so I should have gone 5-1 or whatever. You have to think about it as I have this lineup and all of them were correct or all of them were incorrect. Because you think of it as there's 100 people and you're splitting $100 pot. Let's just say you're each in for $1. If you're all right, whoever gets on all your picks right gets the pots. So if it's 6 picks and like you're the only one that got them all 6 right, you get that $100 pot. If 10 of you got it right, well, you each get $10. If half of you somehow got all 6 right, then you only get $2 each. So you have to construct your lineup ideally where you only maybe a few other people got them all right. And you obviously are trying to make the picks that you think are going to actually occur, but it helps to think of like a game flow to where all of your picks are correct. And everyone else isn't thinking the same thing. Because like when people see this game, and I talked about how everyone wants it to be, 60 points total, I expect there to be a lot of overs. Like, oh my gosh, Kelsey's only 60 yards over. Mahomes over. Worthy over. Like that's probably what everyone's going to do. And if that happens, you're going to be splitting a kind of a small pot with everyone else. I mean, your share is going to be not that high. So I try to, especially when it's just one game, try to focus more on being different than when it's a bunch of games on Sunday. Well, there's a ton of games and a ton of picks. Mm-hmm. So don't focus too much on what other people are doing. Try to focus more on things that you think will be right that other people might try. Basically, tonight's the night to be a hater. When it's the big lineup, big slate, don't be a hater. Find the underdogs. Find those guys that are going to make it. Do those overs on the guys that you really like, that maybe other guys like. But on tonight's the night to be a good old-fashioned hater. And
I agree completely.
I might be a hater, and I might lose, and I probably will lose because, I was a hater for the Super Bowl, and look what happened. I just got wiped. And I might get wiped again tonight. And maybe I'll learn my lesson about, doing too much on the first night of football. But you know what? Being a hater has been my strategy with Pick-6 on these one games. And somehow I don't know anything about baseball. I didn't even know who Aaron Judge was until like the playoffs, like his rookie or second year or whatever. I didn't know who he was. I was like I got a free ticket to the Astros game or something like that. I was like, who's this Aaron Judge guy? And I didn't keep great records, but I'm pretty sure I won pretty heavily on the like one game MLB things they had. Because I just kind of went a little hater on it,
Yeah. And I think it's so interesting because it's what makes peer-to-peer so advantageous. And yet it's also what makes most people playing it kind of get frustrated with the game. And the reason for that is think about it this way. When the majority of people win, that's when payouts are at their smallest. And when only a few people win, that's when payouts are at their largest, which means the vast majority of people are experiencing the less than expected payouts than the more than expected payouts. But if you understand that and you game plan for that, it means that you will more often than not be on the correct side of those payouts. So that's what we're going to try and help all of you guys do.
That's the fundamental conundrum for DraftKings because they need people to understand that this is a peer-to-peer game. Mm-hmm. This is a skill game. It's not flat payouts. And when people, and then a lot of people just view this as like my picks are my picks, and I don't care what everyone else does. Right. And those guys probably aren't watching our show, and they're going to keep losing, and they're going to say blah blah blah. It's rigged. Like those guys on the internet that like all they do is complain how they're like everything's rigged. They're losers. They can't get laid, and everything's rigged against them. Everything's bad, and like there's really no saving those people. Like, but you have to understand that those people, like, they're going to probably keep losing, and they're probably playing this game and they don't understand how to win. And this game is very, very new. And I don't want to sound like a mean old shark, but when a game is new and you got a lot of kind of those losers playing it because they don't really know what they're doing, it's at its easiest. And we're kind of helping people learn how to play this game. So like, you know, lots of people will kind of like not get just mowed through and lose. And in the long run, that's a good thing. But in the short run, there's going to be a lot of people that are just going to lose, and they're going to whine, and they're going to go away, and you might as well take their money while they're still playing. I hate to say it.
No, it's true. I think another point on that is, you know, 3 years from now, we might see Pick-6 optimizers at every single site. We might see ownership projections at every single site, specifically Pick-6. This is the time where it's going to be the most beatable, not just because people don't really know what's going on yet, but because people don't have the kind of help at other places that we are offering on this game. So I'm really excited for Pick-6 throughout the season. And
I think a lot of the Sharks, I don't know this for a fact. I don't really know who's playing Pick-6, but, you know, I like being on TV and doing this Pick-6 show and stuff like that, so I'm playing it a lot. I don't know if a lot of the other heavy DFS guys are really bothering with it. Like, a lot of really sharp guys might be like, I don't know about this thing. They don't really want to feel like learning it. They have enough to play doing other stuff. So it's just, this is the time where if you're going to win at it, you're going to win at it now. It's going to be a lot harder in like 2 years to win at it. So if you really try and you give it your best and you really think things through, obviously, you know, any 1 week, 1 game slate, you're going to, you know, you can lose just like anything else. But it's a lot easier to get an edge now than it is going to be in a year or two.
Yeah. Dr. Rosen points out Pick-6 also doesn't penalize for correlation the way Prize Picks and Underdog do. It's another really good point. And it, to your point, TwoGun, I've seen a lot of really sharp people on Twitter kind of complaining about the recent change of kind of creating some dynamic pricing on DraftKings because they just wanted to find the really bad numbers early in the morning that by the end of the day, everybody's going to be on. And so to me, like, those are some really, really sharp people that aren't trying to play Pick-6 the correct way. It's through correlation and it's through leveraging what everybody else is doing. So with that, we kind of talked a little bit already. We expect people to take a lot of overs. I know one of the picks that you and I agree on, I should say, is less 45.5 receiving yards on Xavier Worthy.
And we all know what's going to happen with like the first drive of the game, right?
It definitely might. And honestly, if it does, I will probably benefit overall because I have his overs on Underdog, and I also might take him in Showdown just because.
Sounds like a lot of, you know what, like what's it called when people like rationalization on your part.
No, I mean maybe, but what I'd say is
I understand that I'm just going to lose. I'm going to lose. Like if it happens, the 50-yard Xavier Worthy bomb is going to happen. I'm going to lose. I'm going to have myself a little cry, and I'm going to have myself some sort of beverage or two to make myself feel better and go to sleep. That's what I'm going to do.
Well, so
I take it like a man, Alex. I take my loss like a man.
You do. But my point is, I don't think we're going to lose
near the end and just going to think I'm going to win and then I lose. That's going to happen one of the two ways. Not so much in the middle. It'll probably be near the beginning or the end. You know, like.
No, I agree, and actually, it's a similar point to the one I'm about to make, which is I don't expect this pick to lose if it loses because Worthy gets 55 receiving yards or 58 receiving yards. If he goes over, I think he's going to 75, 80, 85, maybe even crosses the 100-yard threshold, which is why he can be a good DFS play and not a great Pick-6 pick. So again, I really like the less here, but the main reason why I like the less is just because I think a lot of people are going to take more than 45.5 receiving yards for him, simply because he's the most exciting player in this game that we haven't been able to watch yet at the NFL level. And so people are going to be rooting for him to have that big play, to hit this in one pass, as you said, on the first drive. And there's a chance it doesn't happen all game.
Yeah, it's generally, it's these lines are binary. It's over, you don't get penalized anymore if he scores 46 yards than if he scores 100 yards.
Mhm.
So these guys that are known for likely being, hit or, all or nothing, like let's just say a guy, like take Lamar Jackson, 1.5 passing touchdowns. I don't know how many exact passing touchdowns he has last year, but I remember looking at it and he had 2 or more in 7 out of 17 games, which it doesn't mean that much, but yes, in some of the games he had 3 or 4 touchdowns. That doesn't matter. It's whenever he gets 2. So that's why sometimes you don't think of it as the average. You have to look at the number of times he actually gets over or under that sort of situation. And guys that are known for long bombs are not, their average doesn't mean as much.
Real quick, before we go to a second pick that we think just fits with Worthy, I want to ask you beforehand, when you build these Pick-6 lineups, how much are you trying to separate them from your Showdown lineups and just saying, you know what, I might be rooting for completely different things in my Showdown lineups versus my Pick-6 lineups? Are you okay with that? Or are you trying to kind of make it so that you're rooting for the same thing in both?
It depends on the week, but this week it looks like I'm generally rooting for the same thing. On my Showdown lineups, I try to be more different. Like I talked about how much I don't really want to have much Worthy, but he is in some of my Showdown lineups. Like I don't think I really have him his over pick. Maybe once because I just have like some sort of over everything on Patrick Mahomes.
Right.
But generally, I tend to have when I choose a side with a guy, I generally keep it the same throughout. And it's just whether or not I want to include that. Because obviously there's I have a lot of different Pick-6 lineups. So I don't want one, if I'm wrong about one thing, to just kill me. But I'm generally not trying to be all over the place, pick everything either. I'm generally a little bit more taking a stand more with my Pick-6 lineups than I am with my Showdowns.
Yep, I agree. I think the way that I would put it is I'm fully comfortable with them being completely separate things. And if that means that sometimes I'm rooting for the same thing, great. If sometimes it means that I'm rooting for opposite things, so be it. You're never going to be able to, win on at least one, and you're never going to be guaranteed to lose or not have the chance to win on both. So in agreement. Let's get back to this lineup here. We're starting with Worthy, less than 45.5 receiving yards. Is the next one you're going to Mahomes less than 269.5 passing yards?
Often, yes. If I'm doing that, I'm generally going to, try to do an anti-stack.
Yeah.
Have almost like another guy too. I like Kelsey the most out of all those, picks. So I might use Rashee Rice, or I might just use one of the random guys like Justin Watson or something like that.
I was going to ask you about that because so let's start that. If we end up wanting to backtrack and we don't want to go the Mahomes route, we can change this, but we've got some options here. We've got Justin Watson less than 16.5, which I think is probably really solid. We have Noah Gray less than 12.5. I also think that's solid. The only one that I actually feel like just in a vacuum, I would lean to the over is Samaje Perine. I would lean more than 7.5 receiving yards, but that means that I feel like we can go Justin Watson, Noah Gray, less than plays and have 4 picks right from the start. Do you feel like we should do that?
Yeah, it depends on what you're trying to go for. Because remember, it's Pick-6, but you don't have to do 6 picks. You can do 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. And that is the nice thing about Pick-6 is they don't penalize you for stacking. Mm-hmm. So the question is, if you're doing a 6 pick, you generally want to have a stack because you want to have stuff that's correlated. So if we're doing a 6 pick, then yes, I'm probably going to do try to have at least one passing stack that I'm either before fading.
What would you rather do here? If we're going to build one play for everybody, and I should preface this by saying, it's not necessarily the best idea for you to take what we're building here and just say, oh, I'm going to go do that. Reason being, if we're all doing the same damn thing, then our payouts aren't going to be very good. So what we're doing here is just an example of the type of thing that you want to build out. not necessarily the exact sort of thing you should do. You could even flip this, right? We're going with Mahomes less and Worthy less. You could say, okay, I want to do the exact same thing, but I want to do it with Lamar Jackson. I want to go Lamar Jackson less and Rashad Bateman less, right? So I think that's a key point to make here. You don't want to just do what we're showing here. We are trying to teach with this while also helping to inspire some ideas for tonight's slate.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So,
and now one other thing I want to point out about stacking is that it's a lot easier to stack in these multi-game than doing the single game one. Like, yes, you can do a stack here, obviously, but so can everyone else. When you have 10 games to choose from, well, you don't have to worry about ownership and stuff like that as much. You just choose a quarterback and 2 wide receivers you like, and you can choose a quarterback and 2 wide receivers you don't like, or two quarterbacks. And, it's easy to just do 2 stacks, quarterback, wide receiver, and be done with it. You can't quite do that as much with one game because there's all sorts of different options you can choose here. So
yeah,
it's one of those things where, like, yes, it's easy to stack and generally better to do so, but like when it's multi-game, to me, that's when you definitely want to make the stacks. Whereas when it's single game, I'm a little more cool with just being a little bit weird with it. Because there's I think like random props I like, or position picks I like. Like, for example, Lamar Jackson, I like his under rush yards, which means you can't, stack his passing yards under with other guys or whatever.
Okay, so let's do this instead of going to Watson and Gray, because I agree with the Lamar pick there, and I think it correlates with another thing that I really do like. Real quick though, I want to say I agree with your point on stacking, but what I would say is it's especially important to keep that in mind on stacks where you're actually assuming that the players do well. I would very much caution against saying Mahomes more on his pass yards, with Worthy more on his receiving yards, with Rashee Rice more on his receiving yards. Those are the types of stacks that I think are going to be duplicated the most. Going to the less than on a lot of these guys, I think is still a pretty unique way to go, even if you are stacking. Now, there are going to be other people who do it, but particularly if you're going to some of these, less popular guys like Watson and Gray, I think you're a little bit safer there, but we can skip that for now. Let's go to the Lamar Jackson less than 49.5 rushing yards, because I love this for 2 reasons. Number one, I think that he probably runs less this year than last year just because they brought in Henry. I think that's going to mean more just traditional handoffs than read options. What I don't expect is for him to start scrambling less. That's who he is. That's what makes him the MVP from last year. So it's just the design runs that I think we might see less of from him. But that also means it correlates well with the Derrick Henry more than 64.5 rushing yards. And the reason why I like that so much is because I also think that correlates well with the less thans on Worthy and Mahomes. If Baltimore has the ball because Henry is running the ball well and they are controlling the ball throughout the game, it's going to be really tough for those Chiefs to get there. So this is a really nice start, I think, to any pick.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the key. It's like you're talking about a game script and stuff that's correlated. That's kind of what you're trying to build with these things. Instead of saying, I like that guy over. I don't like that guy under. I like that guy over. Try to have something that makes sense, especially when you're doing, 4 to 6 of these things. If you just really like 1 or 2 of these picks, then just do a 2 pick. Obviously, the 2 picks, you can't really correlate it that much. But you're not like penalized because no one else will correlate their 2 picks either. So if there's
do you have a preference between any sized plays, any sized lineups, or do you kind of just base it on how many picks you really like on a given slate?
Well, it's Pick-6, so try the picks because that's what everyone else is doing.
I also just think,
but I do a variety. Especially since it's new and it's fun. But come on, man! Everyone wants to do the 6 picks.
I don't even know.
But I prefer, if I'm going to do, since you can basically put in as much money as you want, if you're going to do, let's just say $50 and you're doing a Pick-6, maybe don't just do one $50 Pick-6. Maybe do like 5 $10 Pick-6s and use a few different options of the guys you like. don't try to like go opposite of yourself or anything. Just try to use a few things so that like if one guy you're wrong on by a little bit, you still might end up winning. And another thing is if you're doing 6 picks, especially maybe not so much tonight, but especially on Sunday, if you get 0 out of 6 wrong, like right, if you go 0 for 6, you did a good job because that means you correlated stuff well.
Right.
Like you do not want to be going 3 for 3 on your pick 6s. That means you're a failure. If you do 0, 6, or 5, like you can do 0 for 6 and 6 for 6 every single time, you're gonna win a ton of money. If you do 3 for 3 every time, you're gonna just lose. You can be like, you can say to your friends, oh, I did pretty good. I got 4 out of 6 right. Those guys don't win anything. Who cares? It's not about how many. It's not about getting 3 or 4 right. It's about getting 6 right. So when you're looking things over, if you just end up getting beaten and lose, but you got 0 out of 6, like I say, you did a good job.
Yeah, and actually, there are going to be times where the 6 for 6 percentage is so low on an island game slate like this that you might get a better payout for a 5 of 6 than someone who gets 6 for 6 is going to get on the very next island game Pick-6 slate. It really can be that volatile. So it's why we are preaching this idea of leverage what everybody else is doing. Don't just pick what you think is the most likely to happen, because that's what everyone else is doing. All right. So do you like these 4? Are there any other really just good picks that you do like, that you think would work well with these, or maybe they work as a really solid foundation to a different type of lineup overall here on Pick-6?
We got sidetracked. I think we're good. I mean, honestly, like you could force stuff if you want to, but I feel like sometimes just having a pick 4 is fine.
Yeah, I think this is a really good one. If we want to just kind of start from scratch, we can take some of these out. I think another really solid one that I like, we mentioned him earlier, Nelson Aguilar. I think more than 17.5 is really strong. I kind of think he should be priced more along where Rashad Bateman is. I think something like 25.5, 26.5 is where I would feel like he's every bit as likely to succeed as fail at that point. Here, I think he's really likely to succeed. And if you do that, it immediately sets up some inversely correlated guys. Like I think if you're going more on Aguilar, the less than on Bateman makes a little bit more sense. The less than on Likely makes a little bit more sense. The more than on Lamar makes a little bit more sense. So anything else stand out to you here that you like alongside of Aguilar? And why don't you tell us if you have come all the way around on him, and if you also
think about Aguilar, it's like I feel like that type of pick, it can just be like almost like an island pick. Like it doesn't really affect anything else. There's it's nice, almost like you have like 5 picks and you want to make it 6. Like just throw an Aguilar over, because it doesn't really mean much for Lamar Jackson. His amount is like 219 or whatever it is, or 213. It keeps going down.
Yeah.
I guess maybe my hater rate is just contagious or something like that.
No. It's a good point. And I think another way to think about it is compare Aguilar to like a Zay Flowers, for example. If Zay Flowers is going more than 51.5, or you could even think about it, imagine like Justin Jefferson at 91.5 or something like that. For that guy to go more than, he has to be involved in the game throughout the game. He has to have reception after reception. With Aguilar, he could go more than 17.5 on one play and not be involved the rest of the game. So to your point, the inverse correlation is going to be a lot stronger when you're talking about guys who, in order to get there, they have to be really involved, not someone like him who can get there on one play.
Yeah, and that's kind of it's just one of those. He's just one of those guys that's kind of a nice one-off to add if you just need to have an extra choice.
Let's see if we can find some other guys, other picks on the slate, I should say, that just a lot of people aren't going to go to, maybe because they don't even bother scrolling to those. Like, for example, we could go receptions, we could go completions. Like, how many people are going? Man, I really want to choose, more than 25.5 completions from Mahomes. So, what are your thoughts here? Any other kind of just ancillary picks, if you will, that you really like tonight?
See, I like doing the receptions and completions as a stack for both those guys.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very similar to yards, but it's almost even cleaner because it's a smaller amount.
100%.
And one play isn't going to do it either way.
Yeah, and actually, there's almost a weird phenomenon where if you were going more on receptions and yards, I'm not even sure you'd be betting, or you'd be like leaning into the narrative that everybody else likes. Because one of the reasons why you might see so many receptions like that is because the quarterbacks are forced to throw the ball short, and you're not getting the explosive plays that everybody else is hoping for. You're getting these really long, sustained drives where everything's just kind of like dink and dunk. You're throwing into zones, 6-yard completion, 8-yard completion. So I think from that angle, like it also just makes sense if you don't want to say that these guys can't have success tonight and it's not going to be this like great offensive game and it's just going to be a defensive struggle. If you don't like that angle, you can go to completions and receptions instead, and now you have multiple paths to success. So with that, do you have any favorite?
Is really my point. Like, I love correlating these things, and receptions and completions is. I mean, I'm not using as much as I'm using the yards, but I probably should because it's even a more clean way to correlate a quarterback with 2 or 3 of his wide receivers.
Do you have any favorite pairings then? Any quarterback and receiver receptions pairings?
Honestly, not so much on this slate. That's the thing. I just don't have a strong feel for the wide receivers. I just like the tight ends a little bit better, so I'm fading them less certainly on in Pick-6, and I'm generally doing the overs more on the tight ends. But I really just like the running backs. And an interesting thing is you could do. I don't know. You could probably do more like an over on a running back and as under on the completions. It's just another thought.
Yeah, I think another one that I would say is I think one other fun way to leverage what everybody else is doing is there are going to be common correlation thoughts. So what I mean by that is I think a lot of people will say, oh, what happens if Baltimore takes the lead and Kansas City has to, battle back the whole game? Well, okay, I'm going to take overs on Mahomes. I'm going to take overs on Rice, and I'm going to take overs on Derrick Henry rushing yards. But sometimes the correlation doesn't really work that way. Sometimes it's as simple as Baltimore has success offensively running the ball, and therefore Mahomes can't get on the field. And so the direction that people think the correlation works, it actually ends up going opposite in that game. And so you can then just kind of take it a step further, and maybe you're getting it's another way, I think, to end up getting a really strong payout if we wanted to go that direction. But I think I'm with you here. Like the concept of correlating completions and receptions is fantastic, but there's nothing on this specific slate that stands out to me. So anything else here? Passing attempts, interceptions, they're both only at 0.5. Kicking points, I think, is another one, like 6.5.
I just looked at the interceptions last year. Like, Mahomes just throws the ball more, so he's going to he's more likely to throw an interception.
Yeah, we can even check how many games last year these two actually threw interceptions, because I remember there was somebody in our model last year who game after game had like an 80% chance of throwing an interception. And every time I looked at it, I thought that has to be too high. And they finished the year throwing an interception in like all but 2 games. I was like, all right, I think it was correct all season long. But let's see. Looks like Lamar only threw an interception in 6 regular season games last year. Mahomes, I feel like Mahomes was higher if I'm remembering correctly, but I also feel like some of them were pretty fluky, although that might have been the year before. I don't know why that's not working, but regardless, would you lean more or less on these interceptions?
I lean more on Mahomes and less on Lamar.
Yeah, I think I agree with that.
I don't think I'm using the Lamar's interception at all, though. I'm using Mahomes, over interception on like a few, but not that much. But I generally like the other Lamars better. Like I haven't been a lot. Like I generally like
Yeah.
under. I mean, I hate being such a Lamar hater, but I generally am under on him. Passing yards, rushing yards, completions. There's a few where I just take the opposite of that and I just do more. But in general, I like one of the other ones because if anything, I think Baltimore's going to want King Henry to show off his stuff in this game.
Yeah. All right. We got to talk some main slate. We're already over an hour, so let's do this pretty quickly. The one thing I want to say, you've probably seen at the top of our screen, we've got GPP scores. So what the heck are they? They are our flagship metric now at FTN for all of our DFS sports. Essentially what they do is they take everything you could possibly care about for DFS. What's the player's price? What's his projection, ceiling? What are his chances of failing? What's his projected ownership? They take all that information, condense it into one metric that's either a positive number, meaning the player's under-owned and you should think about using him, or it's a negative number, meaning he's over-owned, you should think about fading him. Makes the game super, super simple. It's a perfect counter to all of these players and all of these sites now using contest sims. Not only does it give you the chance to compete with these contest sims, but actually gives you the chance to leverage against them and take advantage of how many people are using these contest sims in a very predictable way. They have been unbelievable for PGA and MLB DFS, and we think they're going to be just as good for NFL. So I can't wait for those. So with that, what I want to say is for the main slate, the number one guy from the GPP scores, the guy who stands out the most, the guy that I can pretty much guarantee will be in my lineup on Sunday is Josh Allen. What do you think of him, TwoGun? I know you haven't given too much consideration to the main slate yet, but do you see yourself using a lot of Josh Allen this week?
I just don't really think about quarterback that much because
it's true. It's true.
We only have one quarterback. I think the Bills are a little bit underloved. They don't really have that. I guess they have the shiny new toy with Keon Coleman, but other than that, people are like, I kind of like James Cook a lot in best ball. So I don't know if I'm going to really love Josh Allen, but I find it interesting what you're saying there. And I'm going to just be bringing a lot of my best ball biases probably. So we'll see what happens there. It's a very unique thing because you don't really know what everyone's thinking, and we don't have a whole lot to go off of. So it's just kind of it's just a very unique week. But I'm probably going to be using a lot of the guys I liked in best ball.
I think one of the things that I love so much about the plan, and one of the reasons why I love seeing such a high GPP score on him, is because I think it makes intuitive sense why he's going to be so under-owned this week. Number one, yes, he lost Stephon Diggs, but I think he's still Josh Allen. And rarely are we going to see slates this season where there's only one truly elite quarterback on the slate. Think about where guys were going in best ball drafts, where guys go in fantasy drafts. Even if you out there listening, even if you haven't played best ball summer, think about your home league, the fantasy football draft that you just did or that's coming up. Who are the quarterbacks going first? You've got Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. Well, guess what? Only one of those guys is actually on this first main slate. So he has this huge advantage, and yet people don't really want to stack him because they don't know who is going to be the number one. In week 4, if we had this exact slate, these exact prices on the receivers, one of Keon Coleman, Dalton Kincaid, Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, one of those guys will have already established himself as kind of the guy, deserving of a lot of ownership at this price. We don't know who it is yet, but all of them could be that guy. And so to me, there's just this very clear reason why Josh Allen and Buffalo Stacks are going to be under-owned. And that's why I love it so much. Hopefully I end up getting the right guy with him. But man, if Josh Allen gives me 40, I don't even necessarily need the smash performance from whichever Buffalo guy or guys I do pick. Maybe I only need them to do pretty well.
Well, with a running quarterback like that, you sometimes don't want his wide receivers to do that great anyways. And that might end up, Josh Allen might end up running the ball more this year because that's just what they do. Yeah. But I think Dalton Kincaid is going to be the most popular out of those 4 because you need a tight end anyways. And, you have one less with Kelsey not playing on Sunday.
I think he's also the safest option with Allen, not just because I think he's the guy most likely to be one of the target leaders on the team, but also because if he doesn't do that great, the chances that you miss out on, a great tight end performance from somebody else is lower than the chances that you're going to miss out on a big wide receiver performance from somebody else if you use one of the Buffalo wide receivers. So I'm certainly going to try to do Alan Kincaid, but if I have to go elsewhere, I might. And one of the reasons for that is because I can tell you Brock Bowers has a really, really strong GPP score at the tight end position. So I'm going to give him a longer look. What do you think? Should we tease some other really good GPP scores, or have we talked enough football already for the first night?
I think we've talked enough football, Alex.
They
got to pay if they want to see the rest of the GPP scores.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this. We are going to be back on Sunday morning, the two of us. You will be live at 9:30 with Brooke talking Pick-6, and then you and I will be live at 10 o'clock. That show will be paywalled for just DFS. But again, every single Monday, every single Thursday, 5:30 Eastern, you and I will be live here for free. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We will catch you next time, and we will hopefully see you all season long.